It's already that time. Stellar Crown is now fast upon us with pre-release events starting this Saturday. And of course, with that, it's time for our top 10 cards from Stellar Crown. I'm not gonna lie, Stellar Crown is a bit of a lackluster set for me overall, at least as a player. As a collector, I think it's got some pretty decent stuff in it, and we'll look at those here in a second. But because what would have normally been the second half of this set in our English release or our international release was spun off into the Shrouded Fable set, there is a little bit less of a playable angle for this set than usual. But it does still have some cool playable stuff, and we'll look at those when we get to the top 10 list. So before we start the actual top 10, we do have to, of course, look at some of the awesome art from this set. There is no shortage of it. Up first, we have a Joltik and a Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur, of course, coming from a Japanese collection that released about a year ago in Japan. There was a Squirtle and a Charmander. The Charmander we got for our Obsidian Flames Elite Trainer Elite Trainer box promo. So we've waited a year for this Bulbasaur and for the Squirtle that you're going to see here in just a moment, but we are getting them. We are not being robbed of getting those two promos, but we're going to get them in the set themselves. Just a little something to get, a little something nice in this set to boost the numbers of the illustration rares, if you will. But we also do get this cool Joltik. The Joltik's got some very cool colors, very bright yellow and purple and white. It just really, really works well. It's interesting that this is Joltik's second illustration rare card. But all the same, it's a beautiful card. I'm glad Joltik's getting it. And this Joltik, as we'll see later, is actually reasonably playable. It's a pretty decent card. Did want to show that Squirtle, of course. Both Bulbasaur and Squirtle, their cards are really cool in that they both kind of share a bit of a story. Bulbasaur, of course, sunbathing with the Pidgeys. Squirtle in the kiddie pool with a Pidgey and a few Pidgeys watching. it's really cool art. It's nice to see this finally make its way to the international market. Other really cool arts that are available in this set are the Hydrapple EX. This honestly is probably my favorite of the arts that I've seen from this set. I really, really like the style here. It's very stylized, but it's also just really cool. It almost looks like an ancient style of like an illuminated manuscript style here. I just really like the Hydrapple. The Galvantula, of course, also really pretty. Works really well, I think, with the Joltik that we just saw a little bit ago. Very similar style, very bright illustration here. I also appreciate that the artist made the Stellar Crown work on this Galvantula, where it would probably have looked goofy in pretty much any other situation. So props to the artist here. And of course, there's the Dox one too. Also really, really pretty art. Not necessarily the one I would be most hyped to get, but it's still good art. Definitely worth highlighting. And then we have Terapagos and Lacey. Terapagos' special illustration rare is probably my favorite of the special illustration rares, aside, of course, from Hydrapple. I just really love the rainbowy color that it has here. It's not the gaudy rainbow of yesteryear where we had like the rainbow rares from Sword and Shield and Sun and Moon. This is more of a tasteful rainbow where we have the original colors and can kind of make out the details in the image here. And it really, really works well for Terapagos. And then, of course, Lacey, Crispin, and Drayton here expressing their personalities in this art. Lacey just being an adorable person, Crispin showing his attitude, and Drayton kind of just sleeping. It works really, really well for this art, and it's definitely a great piece to have in general for the set. I'm super looking forward to hopefully pulling a Lacey and a Terapagos and a Hydrapple. That's maybe asking too much considering how much I've pre-ordered of this set, but we'll see. Now that we've looked through each of the arts that I think are really interesting, it's time to look at the cards themselves for their playability. Up first, we have Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt has the attack Raging Thunderstorm for lightning and fighting. It says, this attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each energy attached to this Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance for benched Pokemon. This gives Raging Bolt decks a single prize option that does have the ability to snipe. I think it's decent. I just don't know that it's good enough necessarily to do what Raging Bolt wants. It is worth considering. It's worth trying out. However, I will note that a lot of the Japanese lists rather for Raging Bolt lately have not been running this. Some of them kind of have experimented with it off and on, but it is still something worth considering and worth observing as we shift into the Stellar Crown meta. Up next is Cinderace EX. Cinderace EX has Flare Strike for Fire Octuple Colorless, which says, during your next turn, this Pokemon can't use Flare Strike, but you can still use Garnet Volley if you can't get out of the active spot. But Flare Strike is doing 280 damage, which is really good for this attack cost. You're able to attach a Fire Energy with Magma Basin to Cinderace, then attach a Double Turbo Energy. That gets you to 260 because of the reduction in damage from Double Turbo Energy, but 260 is not a bad number to be hitting. And additionally, you do have that Garnet Volley attack for Fire Fighting Darkness, which says this attack does 180 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance for bench Pokemon. If you're able to shut off Manaphy, or if they fail to put down Manaphy, this could be a great way to knock out support Pokemon and just take 2 easy price cards before you even have to switch out. And finally, for our honorable mentions, we have Joltik. Joltik has the attack Battery Charge. Search your deck for up to 2 basic Grass Energy and up to 2 basic Lightning Energy, and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like, then shuffle your deck. This is a crazy amount of energy acceleration. 4 energy from the deck is nothing to scoff at. However, I will note that this Joltik has seen pretty limited play recently in Japan. But that said, it just feels like something with this much energy acceleration will be good in the future. It just has to be with that much energy acceleration. Yes, you're giving up an energy on Joltik, probably a prize card with Joltik in the active and only 30 HP, but you're getting 4 energy into play with his attack. It just feels pretty crazy. I will say Raging Bolt probably doesn't want it because it's most likely able to attack going first, or going to second rather, anyway, but something has got to want this. It's one of those cards where it's so strong there's no way something won't want it. And now for the actual top 10. Up first, we have Grand Tree, which says once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a Stage 1 Pokemon that evolves from one of their basic Pokemon in play and put it on that Pokemon to evolve it. If that Pokemon is now a Stage 1 Pokemon, they may search their deck for a Stage 2 Pokemon that evolves from that Pokemon and put it on that Pokemon to evolve it. Then, that player shuffles their deck. You can't use this effect during your first turn, or on a turn, or on a basic Pokemon that was put into play this turn. This is very similar to a Meganium from Lost Thunder in that it rapidly shoots up a Pokemon from basic to fully evolved Stage 2 in the same turn. But of course, you do have to wait a turn to get it to evolve because you can't evolve it on the turn it comes into play. That said, I feel like this is still a very potent effect simply because you are able to search your deck for these cards using Grand Tree. But the flip side to that is your opponent also will most likely get to use this because you'd have to be able to bump Grand Tree, as it is a stadium card that your opponent could also take advantage of. That also said, there are probably other A-Spec cards that you might want to use instead. Something like Prime Catcher, of course, is always a very, very potent card, and you have to weigh Prime Catcher and any other A-Spec against Grand Tree. So whether or not your deck will make the best use of Grand Tree matters, but whether or not it's the best A-Spec for your deck also matters, and that's something to consider. And at number 9, we have another A-Spec. This A-Spec, of course, is Sparkling Crystal. Sparkling Crystal says, attacks used by the Terra Pokemon this card is attached to cost 1 energy less of any type. Primarily, in our testing, we use this for Stellar Pokemon to reduce their attack cost by 1 because their second attacks have some crazy outlandish attack type costs and just make it very difficult to power them up in general. However, Sparkling Crystal can be used by any Terra Pokemon like Dragapult EX, and I do have to wonder if this could help Dragapult a little bit, as you can attach an energy and attach Sparkling Crystal in the same turn without energy acceleration whatsoever, which could be worthwhile. Who knows? I do really like Sparkling Crystal as a card, but like Grand Tree, you kind of have to weigh its usage against other A-Specs like Prime Catcher, Unfair Stamp, and even some of the newer cards in this set. The first Pokemon on our top 10 list now appears as Bouffalant. Bouffalant has the ability Curly Wall. If you have any other Bouffalant in play, your basic colorless Pokemon take 60 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon after applying weakness and resistance. The effect of Curly Wall does not stack. You have an attack called Boundless Power that does 130 damage and prevents you from attacking with this Pokemon next turn, but you're really not attacking with Bouffalant. This is the kind of thing that is used explicitly by Terrapagos decks, as Terrapagos is really the only relevant colorless basic Pokemon in the format now. But I will say that 60 less damage is super relevant and kind of frustrating for the opponent. When we were testing here for Stellar Crown, my friends were playing Terrapagos and I believe the Palkia deck with the Area Zero under depths and all those cool things. And it's very interesting how often the 60 less damage just completely ruins math for a lot of decks. 60 damage is a lot of damage reduction, and Bouffalant can really mess stuff up for a lot of decks, which is why it's made this list at number 8. At number 7 is, it's our first supporter card, Briar. Briar says you can only play this card, only if your opponent has exactly 2 prize cards remaining. Until the end of this turn, if your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from one of your Terra Pokemon's attacks, take 1 more prize card. Now this effect is really strong, and anytime you're able to take an additional prize card in the TCG is very much something to take note of. And I know some people on Twitter especially were very concerned about this card, and perhaps rightfully so. I will state, however, that this is a fairly specific situation where you can take the additional prize card. First off, your opponent has to have exactly 2 prize cards remaining, and the damage done has to be done by a Terra Pokemon's attack. So effective attack is not going to work here, and it does have to be at exactly 2 prize cards remaining for your opponent. So they've made it very, very specific for when you're going to get an additional prize card. However, it's still perfectly doable and could matter in a game. It could fix your prize trades so that if you've been forced to go off on prize numbers, that fixes your numbering so that you can catch back up in the prize trade. Briar is an interesting card, and I think it'll see some play. How much, however, remains to be seen. At number 6, we have Glass Trumpet. Glass Trumpet says you can only play this card if you have a Terra Pokemon in play. Choose up to 2 of your benched colorless Pokemon and attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of them. This is a cool version of energy acceleration for colorless Pokemon. Something like Hisuian Zoroark V-Star can take advantage of this. Terrapagos, of course, takes advantage of this. In general, it's very interesting and doesn't need a specific energy type, which is nice, even though it can only attach to colorless Pokemon on the bench. But this makes me want to play Hisuian Zoroark V-Star a lot because it's pretty cool. Just that basically universal acceleration of type to colorless Pokemon makes it very intriguing. It is a little limited in that effect also, but you know what? You just have to have a Terra Pokemon in play, so why not make use of it? It does help in the Raging Bolt matchup for Terrapagos. You're able to use the second attack on Terrapagos that prevents damage from non-colorless basic Pokemon. So Raging Bolt, of course, has to try to gust around you to remove the effect of that secondary effect in order to take a knockout. So I like Glass Trumpet. It's going to see play. How much, again, remains to be seen. Next up is Crispin. Crispin, I think, is where this list really starts. Like I said earlier, this set is a little bit weaker in terms of playable cards, but Crispin is definitely one of the playable cards in this set. Crispin says, search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards of different types, reveal them to your opponent and put one of them into your hand. Attach the other energy to one of your Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. It is very much worth noting that it is the second energy that gets attached. So if you only pull 1 energy out of your deck, you don't get to attach it. Be aware of that. That said, this is a really cool universal energy acceleration card. It is a supporter card. It is only 1 energy, but you're searching the other energy. So you can attach with Crispin and attach for turn to the same Pokemon if you need, which makes this card super strong in a lot of decks. However, it is a supporter card, so that's worth noting. But I think it's going to see play. I think it's going to pop up here and there and just be a pretty good option in general for decks that need it. At number 4 is Terapagos EX. Terapagos EX has the attack Unified Beatdown. Does 30 times damage. If you go second, you cannot use this attack during your first turn. This attack does 30 damage for each of your benched Pokemon. And then, of course, Crown Opal, which is an attack I mentioned just a little bit ago with Glass Trumpet, says during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic non-colorless Pokemon. Once again, this means Pokemon like Raging Bolt that would normally do huge damage and just knock out Terapagos aren't going to be there to do their big booms because they're blocked out of it. So they'll have to try to guss around Terapagos so that they can reset the effect of this attack to do damage. All in all, Terapagos is not a bad Pokemon, and I think it's a reasonably playable deck. It might be more useful as a tech or just as a means of keeping Area 0 Underdepths in play, but it's a pretty good card all the same. Speaking of good cards, we have Fan Rotom. Fan Rotom has the ability Fan Call. Once during a turn, you may search your deck for up to 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 HP or less, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. You can't use more than 1 Fan Call ability during your turn. Now, this is only during your first turn, but you're searching 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 HP or less. Very often, this will be Hoothoot, Noctowl, Buffalon. This is way better than it seems at a glance. And speaking of way better than it seems at a glance, it's possible and even likely that you will completely ignore the attack on this Pokemon, but do not, because it is extremely threatening. Fan Rotom has the attack Assault Landing for a single colorless energy that does 70 damage. If there is no stadium card in play, this attack does nothing. Chances are you're going to get a stadium card out because these decks that like Fan Rotom tend to run 3 to 4 copies of Area 0 Underdepths, which makes you very likely to start it. 70 damage is really good in a meta where a lot of the basic Pokemon that your opponent will start with have 70 HP or less. And some of our testing games have ended in a donk because of this Fan Rotom. This card is crazy good. Speaking of crazy good, Area 0 Underdepths is a stadium card that says if a player has a Terra Pokemon in play, that player can have 8 Pokemon on their bench. When this card leaves play or a player no longer has any Terra Pokemon in play, they discard benched Pokemon until they have 5 Pokemon on the bench. If both players discard, the owner of this card discards first. This is similar in effect to Skyfield. Of course, you have to have a Terra Pokemon in play to take advantage of it, but the effect is extraordinarily good. You have basically 3 extra bench spaces. With how bench heavy a lot of the decks are in the current format, this effect is absolutely invaluable. So this card will see play, and decks like Origin Form Palkia V-Star, they thrive on this effect. It is amazing what Palkia can do. Yes, Miraidon Iron Hands is going to give it grief, but man, Area 0 Underdepth still makes it a force to be reckoned with. Now, finally, at number 1 is my last pick, my very top card from this set. You've probably already guessed it. It is Noctowl. Noctowl has the ability Jewel Seeker. Once during a turn when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, if you have any Terra Pokemon in play, you may search your deck for up to 2 trainer cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. It also has Speedwing for 60 damage, but we don't care about Speedwing. We care about Jewel Seeker. This effect used to be seen on a Stage 2 Inteleon in the Sword and Shield era, and frankly, Jewel Seeker is an extraordinarily ridiculously powerful ability. This will see play, period, and it will see play in quite a few decks. Any deck that could potentially make use of Noctowl will make use of Noctowl because it is just that good. Any 2 trainer cards you want. That is an item card and a supporter card, a stadium card and a supporter card, a stadium card and a tool card, whatever you need. Noctowl can provide it for you and will provide it for you if you have a Terra Pokemon in play. And a lot of decks are already running Terra Pokemon. Terapagos is a great option as a basic, but some decks already run stuff like Wellspring Ogerpon EX or even the traditional Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, and so Noctowl becomes an option for those decks. Frankly, this is one of the best engines the game has ever seen. It is a rehash, ultimately, of the Inteleon engine from Sword and Shield, but this is a Stage 1, it's not even a Stage 2, and with Area 0 Underdepths, you're able if you get it bumped, to dump these into the discard pile, recycle them, reuse them later in the game. It just makes Noctowl the clear winner and the absolute #1 for Stellar Crown. As always, if you want to learn more about Stellar Crown, do so at my website, justinbasil.com. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.